and I broke probably 2 paddles a summer, and I broke my thumb. I can't tell you how many times just from that down crash.
Yeah, all the thumb injuries. Yeah,
Yeah, I'll
I've
tell
had
you
a
what,
thumb
man.
injury.
And everyone gave me so much grief for paddling ATs. I would just go through ATs. I broke so many ATs.
Which model? Which model?
Didn't matter. But
Oh,
I chose them because they would break easier than the Werners. So when I broke like a Shogun, I would damage myself. But if I
oh, okay.
broke an AT, I was perfectly intact, even though the paddle was in pieces.
More of the paddle would take the blunt of the force instead of the blade. Yeah, and I could see that. It doesn't transfer the energy as hard to your joints. You're less likely to blow a shoulder out,
Yeah,
basically, right?
there was no worry. It didn't
Yeah,
matter what happened to me. I wasn't gonna blow a shoulder because I knew the
yeah,
paddle was gonna break. The only one that I got hurt on was a Shogun. And then, so like Will was giving me crap because like right here on my wall, I've got 3 shattered Shoguns, like just the
yeah,
blades pinned up. And he's like, dude, like Werner is gonna come after. They're gonna be pissed at you. And it's like, that is
yeah.
pride right there. That is
I
earned. It
noticed
is
that. I seen
so
that in
hard
one
to
of your
do that.
videos that you had all these broken Shogun blades, and I was like, did he collect those? I was like, there's probably some stories behind those.
Oh, there's stories. But my favorite story, I've actually got my brand new one right here. Oh, hang on. So, so my favorite story was when you were prototyping that new AT paddle that came out, and you guys put this same little quirk right here into it where it connects to the main paddle. Hang on.
Hold it up.
So right, oh my god. Okay, so right here where it pinches down
Lift it up some.
into the main paddle, right
Okay.
here, this little spot, this crease
Yeah.
going right there. You guys put that right back into the AT too, and I was like, man, I don't know about that. That's literally
That's
every
a
time I
failure
break
point.
one of these, that's right where it goes. That's the stress point.
Yep. Was you there the day I broke one at the racket race? Right
No,
at the start?
I missed you, and we'd had the conversation the night before with that very paddle, and you sheared it exactly on the spot.
It is, oh man, I slung that shit and I was hand paddling. I was cussing mad. I took one stroke and then I heard it pop and it broke right in that weak point. That part of the paddle is called the hosel, and it's where the blade enters into the where the shaft enters into the blade, and that is a crucial. And I stress that. I stress that point is going to be where is our failure point. And I know this. I actually built a mechanism to test paddles. And I was breaking. So we bought some Werner Shoguns and I was breaking them.
I
Man,
remember that you guys made a video of that, right? Where like you
yeah,
cracked it and then you went out and saw if it could take a second.
yeah. And no, I had this video is not, it was a jig. It was a jig with a hydraulic press to break paddles. And it gave me a number to show me. And man, you want pain. It hurt to watch 6 Werner Shoguns just to break them. I'm like, wow. I mean, you're talking about what? I mean, they're
Six
like
grand.
300. Yeah. But it's funny. I learned a lot about paddles during that time too. So what I'd found out. I mean, if you want to talk about paddles for a minute,
Sure.
what I'd found out was what Warner paddle really good at. So they changed everything to a fiberglass shaft. So their deflection was huge. They have these really stiff. And I've always said it. I think the Shogun paddle is a beautifully designed blade, and I love the aesthetics of that blade. And that rib in the back is a functional strengthening mechanism.
Oh,
And
absolutely. It's like
and
corrugation.
if you've ever watched like a paddle that Shogun go through the water, it's like they flared the edges a little bit and curls come off the side of the paddle and help propel it forward. And I
Beautiful.
stressed that to one of the engineers, and I said, "Let me tell you, I've watched this. It's my favorite paddle." And I was like, "They've nailed it." I said, "It was like a work of art." And I said, "When you watch it," I attached a GoPro to it and watched it go through the water, and it was beautiful how the water bubbles behind it and almost like pushes it more forward. And I was like, wow, I was really impressed with the Warner Shogun. And that's what we were up against, was trying to figure that one out.
Yeah, I think they have like a designer from Boeing or some other aircraft
I would totally believe
engineer.
that because if that would not shock me at all. But you got to think Warner's been in, and it was funny when I was kind of brought over to AT, they was like, hey, you're a kayaker, you want to test some kayak paddles? I'm like, sure, I'll test some kayak paddles. And it's like, yeah. And one of the meetings, they were like, yeah, we're gonna pretty much squash Warner. And I was like, buddy, I'm telling you right now, those guys have been doing it for 50 years, and they've learned a lot over the time. And you see, they have stand the test of time. Warner, I mean, even though like the people will break a blade with Warner, and like, see, AT would give you a whole free paddle, right? You break a paddle, AT give you one, and that's the only place they could beat Warner. You break a Warner paddle, Warner would say, okay, 180 bucks. I just dropped down like 350 bucks. They don't warranty paddles. And it was like they say you can buy another blade and we'll put one on there. And even if all that, people still go out and buy another Warner even after that because it's just such a great blade. It's such a great blade.
Oh yeah, I've got paddles. I think of a paddle that yeah, I definitely have a paddle now that's been reconstructed in 3 pieces. It's a new it's on its 4th iteration of
Yeah, exactly.
manufacturer. Because it's worth it. And what we do is we do a group send back through the shop. So we just collect everyone's broken throughout
Yeah,
the year, and then together and back, it's super cheap.
yeah.
And it somehow, it works out. But I think the best thing AT ever did was that Super Duty deal, like you're saying, where like lifetime
Lifetime,
warranty.
yeah,
But
on the
then
shaft.
I almost murdered somebody when I found out that if you delam the paddle blade itself,
The
they
blade's
the
not, yeah, it's
blade's
shaft
nothing.
only. Shaft only. You got to read the small print.
Yeah, so here I am on a job site at work with a box cutter razor blade fishing sand out from the layers and putting 5-minute epoxy there and clamping
Yeah.
it all. And I posted some photo on Facebook like, buy it, it'll last forever, they said. It'll be fun, they said. And like, the AT fuzz came descending upon my Facebook account. It was pretty
Yeah.
funny. Read the fine print.
Yeah, exactly. And I wasn't a big fan of the super light. I liked the super light. I didn't like the super duty. The super light was I think a better constructed paddle. The thing was the super light had more flex.
Mm-hmm.
They added like a Kevlar weave to the super duty and it didn't flex as much, so it broke easier. It sounded kind of crazy that a lighter, more flexible paddle, but it flexed when it hit things where the super duty was so strong.
Which
And
which is why I now love a bent shaft Shogun, because it's just a tiny bit, but I would basically paddle with a 2x4 or a piece of steel after paddling those. I don't want flex
yeah,
anymore. And the Flexi used to be my go-to again for that shoulder protection thing,
yeah.
but no, I mean they got something right because I destroyed them in every other way. Like I was paddling on a wave and the two halves came together, and I'm like trying to jam
Oh,
them back together while surfing and get the offset back.
you talking about it was like a super duty?
Yeah, and it came apart like a vacuum at the joint in the
Yeah,
center.
because that's what they call a unibody construction where they mold the shaft and the paddle was all one.
Right,
I
and it
don't know
goes
if
in a
you remember.
clamshell and then it's inflated
Yeah.
and
So
resin
that's
slips
only a
through.
two-piece paddle,
Right,
where you look at like a Warner bent shaft is 4 pieces.
right,
5 pieces counting the ferrule that connects
right.
the paddle in the middle. But it's like that and it was an expensive blade to make. The margins were so low on it. And right away, AT was like, they ran with it as long as they could. But then that's when they started that advanced series line. And they botched that right out of the gate. They botched that advanced series line right out of the gate. They tried to experiment. What a Negra is because you
Oh
deal with
yeah.
like composite playbooks. A
It's
Negra,
basically, for those who don't know, it's basically a plastics version of a Kevlar, right?
exactly.
And
Yep.
it's that silver looking. It's very very pretty stuff.
It's nice, but what I had found when I started tinkering around with those things and I looked at them and I was like, the glass and carbon does not want to bond to the Anegra. It doesn't
Right.
want to bond. It separates from the Anegra. And one thing that they wanted to preach with that paddle was you was able to break it and it wouldn't fly apart. But when it broke, it was just like limp, just flopping around. It was a useless blade. I was like, if I break this blade, I can't use it anyway. It's just doing this. It's got no purchase. I was like, what's the point? Why do I even care? And so I fought and I fought and I eventually got them to convince them to take the Negra out of everything but just the tip. So just around the new AT Advanced series only has a Negra. You can hold it up to a light and see this. It only has a Negra in the last. It's 30%.
One of the rep told me at some point, but it's like it's a mind-boggling number of layers of thin fiberglass. It's like 7 or 13 or just layer after layer after layer. Instead of doing like, because you could do that in like a couple shots of like 20 ounce, but they specifically do it in all the layers so that they can put like a little more, a little here at this.
Yeah.
The composition is very technical, and it's something that I don't think the average consumer gets. I think they think that it's just like, you know.
Yeah, and they cook it in the oven. They accelerate it so it's a compression molding. You're right. They put the foam core down. So they put this foam core down and they layer and layer and layer, and they just keep layering it. Then they clamp a mold together and then clamp it all the way around with like CNC that's programmed. You sit in there, it CNCs out your blade, and they all can be the same. Say you want to do you CNC out a Geronimo, or you want to CNC out a Samurai. You can do whatever. You can just whatever. It's all the same blade.
Right. So you're making a blank that's larger, and then the CNC takes it down where it's supposed to be.
Yeah. It's like it's like 2 feet by 2 feet, and it's big flat area, and it's got all the thickness in the middle, and it just cuts around that. That's the fiberglass blades, and then so the foam core blades are made a little differently. They put Dynel around the outside edge, and then it's foam in the middle, so it's foam in between the layers.
How did they get that Dynel in there? Like, I understand the clamshell idea, because I've seen videos of them doing it for like RC planes and stuff like that. But how do they keep the Dynel on that edge when they're doing that pour and infusion and all that stuff?
It's just basically like they get strips of Dynel, and it's 2 layers. They do back-to-back layers, and they just run it around the edge and then close it up between 2 blades and then compress it and then heat it. And it's all glass together. You notice Dynel comes out. You can see it come out of blades.
Yeah, you can pull it out. So what you're saying is, like, they make this blade and this blade, and then they lay the Dynel, close it, heat it, and then they put the foam in.
Yeah.
Probably after they just pour the liquid.
I don't know what Werner does. I'd like to know, but I have no idea.
Well, you see like air bubbles in there when you look, so I always assumed they were pouring liquid in.
Okay.
I don't know. I'm not a materials engineer. I have no idea.
Yeah.
I've worked with composites a little. Like, for me, the idea of with the fiberglass of like way overdoing your edges and then trimming it down with the router makes so much sense, because the worst part about working with composites is trimming, and it's awful, especially with Kevlar, which is why I think a huge part of why it's just not used anymore. Like, have you ever sat with Kevlar shears and tried to cut it out while your mold, your piece is still green in a mold? It's the most miserable thing ever.
Yeah, that's how we prototype boats. So when you prototype a boat, you basically you lay up a fiberglass mold, and I've been involved in a lot of those, like laying up fiberglass molds when you want to run a prototype.
Yeah, like glassing. But like, my point is, like, doing that with glass is so much easier than doing that with even like one strip of Kevlar. Like, the Kevlar just makes everything so miserable.
Oh, when it strands out everywhere?
Right, and the scissors like won't cut on one strand.
Yeah,
and you're sitting there like an idiot.
It's like bending in half. Oh, I've been there, done that, and you're just aggravated. You're like, then the resin starts kicking off on you, and it's like, you put too much catalyst in it, and you can feel it getting hot, and you're like, shit. Shit.
I've thrown projects that were on fire out the back door of a building.
Exactly.
Before. Yeah.
If you cook them too hot, you get them too hot.
It wound up being 100 degrees that day when it was supposed to be 80. So it's just way overkicked.
You've accelerated that one.
Oh, yeah. It was funny because it was a science lab, too. So, like, here's an exothermic reaction, kids.
Yeah.